Okay, I'm a little bit cold right now. I want to be outside though in the fresh air. It's a little bit nippy. Even though I'm in the southern part of the United States, it's just we're getting the cold that the north and the northeast and the Great Lakes and Midwest has been having. But I'm going to cover a very fascinating topic right now. I don't know how long I'm going to talk, but I may go on for a while. I'm just trying to cover this. I don't have an outline, but I'm gonna organize. I should do some material of this on my astrologers channel. Some of you know, and I've been promoting that before. Astrologers channel is where I talk about the things of the stars and interpretations of human events, human history being predicted by the positions of the celestial bodies. Okay, so astrologers is all about that. So I'm really just doing a video which is along that theme and that topic. Okay, so we're talking about, as the title suggests, the 4 blood moons, red blood moons. So depending on where you are in the world, and if you're in a very polluted environment, yeah, you're going to get more red. It's basically just an atmospheric phenomenon. It's colorization, because the more particles that the moonlight has to shine through in order to reach the surface and your eyes, it's going to change the color. If the air is perfectly clear, I would think that there's not going to be much red. So that we'll have to talk about a little bit, like why it's such a sensationalistic thing to say that it's a blood moon. Okay, so aside from that, okay, we know our blood is red, and that's a good thing. You just don't have to see too much of it. Women see it once a month, men irregularly. Now, we're not going to get into vampires or anything else here. You know, it's not funny. We're going to talk about this idea that 4 moons are in succession. And we're going to talk about the idea that, OMG, this never happens before, or it's so rare. Okay? And we're going to go with scientific data before we go, pronouncing some, huge prophetic proof that we think there is now. Okay? Okay, because I will be the first one to tell you that I believe and I feel like we're in the end times. I'll be the first one, and I've said this. You hear it stated in many of my videos. And what do I mean by the end times? The eschatological philosophy, or that point of view. Doomsday. The sky is falling. It's Armageddon. It's apocalypse upon us. The world's going to end. Well, not exactly. And, the Mayan calendar thing, remember that, 2012? Or 2013 if they were wrong? What does it mean, these big cycles of history that we think, that we study, that we want to create a cosmology of it? Well, I will also be the first one to admit that it's a belief system. You can do a self-fulfilling prophecy of it, or you can just sit around and watch things happen and say this is bigger than any other time before. Gosh, if we were people living in the 1800s or the 1600s or whatever, we just weren't that special. Because you have to live right now. Now it's 2015. Still, as I get older, I'm just like, wow, it's 2015. I remember when it was 1987, and I thought, there's a number. But here we've got this number, it's 2015, and we've made it this far, and we're like in this end times prophecy. I'm sorry, it's hard for me to do a video, but I'm still going to push on, regardless of my condition of my throat. Do we believe this? Am I trying to tell you to believe in this prophecy? Well, I want you to take it with a grain of salt. And I want you to also consider very carefully what I'm about to tell you. Because I say it's the end times. I say that we have to live for something. You know, I think we should take our existence very important right now. We're looking at nuclear annihilation since 1945. And they seem to be playing around. You've got a lot of leaders who seem to be a little bit careless and just pushing things too far. Maybe it's their egos, maybe it's just their inexperience. Who are these leaders and where do they come from? They should do a better job, you would imagine. Now, give them this. It's a hard position to be in, but that's no excuse. You've got to get it right, okay? Or else move aside and give someone else the job. Are we in the end times because we see this tetrad? What is a tetrad? Okay. Now, looking at the data, and NASA has it, and I just don't always believe everything NASA has or what it says on Wikipedia, but four eclipses in a row, and they have to be umbral, and that's what they usually are, and they should be total. That means the alignment is so perfect between the three celestial bodies, the sun, the earth in the middle, and the moon, and sometimes the moon's in the middle, depending on whether it's a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse. Solar eclipse is where the moon gets in between the earth and the sun. The sun here, and the earth, and then the moon's in the middle of them. But when that alignment becomes like a perfect straight line, as far as we know, geometrically and astronomically, then you will have the alignment where it makes the shadow completely darken the moon, or it may be an arc of light, or partial, like penumbral. So there's totality, which is an exact alignment, and then there's partial, and there's annular ones, and so on and so forth. So there's different scientific astronomy terms, and also we use the same thing in astrology, and we try to say what does it mean for human events. These alignments do not always happen in cycles, because the movements of the celestial bodies are such a way that you have to try to visualize it, almost like you use the eyes of God, God's eye, like a bird's eye view over the solar system. You have to see that these things move in such an exact way, like a spinning top, and sometimes it wobbles, and sometimes the alignment will be a straight line and then it moves out of that, so on and so forth. But there are these patterns that you can see when you calculate over time. So we're basically calculating a graph, we're calculating, you have to visualize an animation of all of it, and when these alignments happen, you do like a freeze frame, and then you see how frequently it happens. Okay, and this is very juicy stuff. Like if you're into science and studying this amazing universe that we're in, that we're just a very tiny part of, it's very awe-inspiring. And that's why I do study astrology, and I've been doing that since 1987, in fact. And before 1987, I thought, that's just nonsense. I was the world's biggest skeptic that I could imagine at that time. I said, whenever people brought up the idea, or I just would sit there and try to conceive of it, I said, no way. 1987 came, and I completely turned around and I said, I'm going to study this. And the moment that I decided to be open to studying it and put some effort into it, it was all over. And I realized this stuff really matters. Not only that it's fascinating and you learn it and you become like a scientist and a thinker about it and a philosopher, and for me, I started to understand the universe, and I started to understand life more, and I started to understand there's a pattern and a timing for things. So this is where all this stuff is coming from. But it's funny how these people that are pushing this red blood moon tetrad idea as prophecy, they're not astrologers. So you gotta figure, why do they believe in this stuff, but yet they don't say they're astrologers? They actually, many of them, are dead set against astrology. So I find that to be very curious and strange about human nature, that people just can't put things together and like work as a team, to say, well, we all see the things the same way, we should believe together and work in harmony, but people don't. People don't. People want to take categories and say, I'm this, I'm Baptist, I'm Jewish, I'm this, I'm that, you know, and I can't think any other way. I think that's ridiculous. That's why I don't categorize myself. I don't limit myself, and I talked about that before. I'm basically open to the great, largest spiritual truths, and that's why I'm qualified to give you the information from my standpoint, from my opinion. I'm very central. I don't let anything distort what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to teach, what I found out. How rare are these? So I looked at that and I said, you know, this is very serious. If these people, these Christian televangelists, these neocons, are trying to tell us that this is the reason, here's the proof that we're in the end times. First of all, I didn't need them to tell me that, but why would they try to tell all of us that? Why would they try to sell their books and promote, you know, themselves through that? Well, the frequency of it happening, when you study this really juicy information, it shows you that from the, you know, like the end of the 1400s into the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, and 1800s, it's very rare to have a tetrad. That means 4 of these eclipses, these perfect alignments in a row. So it has to happen within 2 years, because there's a concentration of the frequency. It happens more frequent. It happens that there's going to be 2 within a year, and then 2 within the next year. Okay? Well, why didn't they happen for these hundreds of years? It's just the way the movements are. They don't line up, and it's because, and whether or not this is true, it's predictive. You know why? I would tell you. I'll just tell you flat out. You've got to understand these things. You've got to really have the knowledge to look at it, and I'm going to tell you how to do so. In the year 1500, there was no one looking up at the sky, keeping track exactly. There was a few people there, and you know, they were starting to have telescopes then. But if you go back to, let's say, 1200, or you go back to the year 600, which was even before Muhammad and before Islam started to spread around the world, and they promoted science, and they borrowed from the ancient Vedic texts, the Hindus. And if you go to those years, you go all the way back into these periods, no one has a telescope, no one's able to make exact observations, and no one's able to record it and say, hey, it just happened, as far as we know. We think that, and we have a really good rational reason to assume that, because there's no records of it. We don't find any records. We don't look around and find some like hidden observatory with all the records written down, and they said, wow, I just saw the moon go through total shadow. I observed it and I proved that it happened. We don't have these records. We don't. So what I'm trying to say by pointing all of this hard fact to you is that NASA is backtracking. They're just taking a formula and calculating all the way back. And so far, also on Wikipedia, I find that the records that they're showing in their graphs that they're making public go back to about 500 AD. I haven't seen too much that goes back to BC. I've seen a few of it because they try to align it with the time of Jesus. If Jesus truly lived around the time of where BC changed to AD, and where he was supposedly, the crucifixion supposedly occurred about between 33 and 36 AD. So I had seen a few attempts to show if there's any tetrads of eclipses then, red blood moon eclipses. So looking at the past 1500 years, because like I said, what they're showing like on Wikipedia goes back to 500, it's an uneven pattern, but all things are not chaos. They become regular if you look at them long enough. Okay, you have to understand that. That's another principle. The longer you look, and the more you try to like calculate things out. And by the way, all they're doing is using a formula. They don't have exact observations. So, I mean, this can really give you a chuckle when you're a true scientist. These things are not proven absolutely. No one was there to observe it. They're just like they call in ufology, Reverse engineering. They have reverse engineered, that's the data that NASA has, okay? Nothing more, nothing less. You can't prove anything with it. But according to the formula and according to the most recent observations that they want to claim that they have done, they show when the eclipse is going to happen exactly and how much of a shadow there'll be, how long it will last, and then they're going to predict like 6 months or so later when the next one will be. As far as I've been able to tell, and you can see my videos, their predictions are accurate, and that's why we respect astronomy as a science, and NASA is supposed to be like the cutting edge agency of space and astronomical observations. Even aeronautics, they're going to fly out there supposedly, that's very questionable. But looking at the data, we see that 4 blood moons happen. We're in the midst of them right now as I'm making the video, and there will be others coming up. I think there's 4 more for the rest of the century. Prior to this, they had one in 1966-67. Prior to that, they had it in around 1948, I think 49. And prior to that, I think there was 2 more in the 20th century. Okay? However, here's a big turning point. Hopefully you're paying attention and listening, droning on. I know it's a long video, but this is really good stuff. However, they don't all coincide with Jewish holidays. Let's just pause. Let me say that again so you can contemplate on it. 4 blood moons, or 4 umbral eclipses in a row within 2 years, do not always coincide with Jewish holidays, with significant Jewish holidays. And see, the thing is, before you get stunned by that, before you start quoting that and talking about it and calling Alex Jones or before it's news or wherever you go to discuss your stuff, and by the way, you can feel free to make comments here or on my astrologer's channel. Before you go barking off about that, you have to realize something about Jewish holidays, okay? I'm talking from a Jew here, okay? Jewish holidays are calculated quite simply by the use of basic astronomy, the same way that NASA has been doing and using their new instrumentation, their telescopes and their Hubble telescope and everything. They do it based on calculating out with their formulas each year when there's going to be an eclipse or a full moon or a new moon. You see, all of their holidays, almost all of them, all of the Jewish holidays since thousands of years now that they've been doing it, I think at least 2,500 years, possibly up to 3,000 years, but not longer, because before that you get prior to King David and King Solomon, his son, Shlomo, David and Shlomo. Prior to that, to the real height of ancient Israel and the Israelites, I don't think that they had a organized priesthood or any astronomer priests who were able to do this consistently. Because then you're getting back in the time before the tribes and before the Abraham and everything, and then you had Moses in between all that. So this is about 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. There was no Jewish holiday keeping. There was no consistency. What I'm saying is that it is definitely more than 2,000 years, probably about 2,500 or possibly more. But there's this tradition, talking about Jewish holidays, so they circulate their information amongst themselves, amongst their culture, if you want to call it like another civilization. The Jews know when they're supposed to be keeping a holiday. That's the basis of their religion, of their nation. They're going to have the holidays so that they know wherever they are, they don't see other Jews, but they get a feeling of togetherness because Jews 10,000 miles away are doing the same thing that day. They're sitting down for their Seder, or they're sitting down and they're having Passover, or they're sitting down having Yom Kippur. Okay? It's all based on, like I said, where the moon is. It's a lunar calendar. It's a lunar solar calendar. I mean, you can't do without the solar, but they call it lunar calendar because it's specific to where the moon is in relation to the sun. Okay? So it's kind of a misnomer to say it's lunar, because you can't have lunar without solar. Okay? So people need to understand just even that basic before you even discuss or try to debate me. I mean, be able to explain those things, please. Otherwise, be open and try to listen and learn to what I say, because, I get that all the time when people start to argue, and it's like, you don't even freaking know the first clue about this stuff, so try shutting up and listening. Especially people who are not Jews that think they don't understand something about Jews. Now, come on. At least if you're going to be against something, have a reason that you can explain why you're against something. Okay? So that comes from the Jew side. And I've explained it. And I have said now that if these people, these Christians, okay, and there's a few of them, I'm not going to mention their name, I'm not trying to sell their books, I really couldn't care less if you don't buy their books. I'd rather you watch my video because you can trust that more. They're trying to say that the holidays don't always line up, but it's very easy for the eclipses to line up or not to line up because the holidays happen when there's alignment of the sun and the moon. So that's when they happen. They don't do Jewish holidays unless it's on a day possibly when it would be an eclipse. They don't do a holiday in between the cycle, like on the 17th day or the 23rd day of the moon cycle. They don't. It's either on the new moon or the full moon. So I've made that point, that fact, very clear. So what does that tell you? Is it that significant that the Jewish holiday lines up with a series of eclipses? No. No, logically speaking, no, it doesn't. It doesn't mean you suddenly become like, OMG, I can't handle it, it's the end of the world. No, you don't. You don't. That's not a reason to do that. I'm sorry. And the false prophets that are out there trying to tell you that, I just have to expose them to you. I just have to expose their futile attempts to get you hooked to other things they want to believe. That's not a reason to believe in them. They haven't really given you anything of any awe. So now that I've discounted that for you, I have dispelled those rumors and that kind of shock. I'm not trying to shock you into thinking that it's the end of the world. That's not how it's going to be done. Okay? I will explain to you many different ways in many different videos, and I expect you to get together with me at some time. I'm going to make myself available, and you better go out of your way to do it, to connect with me. I don't want to make it as a threat. I mean, I'm just saying as an open invitation. We're going to have a good time. But as far as doing videos and trying to sell books with like false ideas and stuff, I don't appreciate that. If I get together with any of those people and I'm going to confront them, then they're not really going to be able to come out of it very well. I can debate anybody on this kind of information, and I guarantee you they would run from that fight. So don't give them more power, okay? I've already taken that part, to shreds. I've shown you that it's just nonsense. However, let's look at the frequency of it, and let's look and see if there's any like real coincidence and real like amazing supernatural things going on. Okay, let's just see if there's anything really supernatural about it. Have things been going on within this Tetrad? We're already more than halfway through. I told you before with the video, look at the date specifically, just before at the end of December, before we went into the center of it, I told you January 5th and January 6th, between those 2 or 3 days, there was going to be the middle point of the Tetrad. That was. It's very simple to see that. I just looked at it ahead of time. I analyzed it. So if that's the middle point, we've got just about a year to go. There's another one coming up. There's another eclipse, which would coincide with Passover, I believe. And then the next one, which is the final one, the number 4. See, the one on Passover is number 3, and the next one is number 4. That will coincide with another holiday at the end, toward the end of 2015, in September, if I remember correctly. I don't have the graph right in front of me. So many dates to remember. I have to be like a computer. But we're entering into the second half. What is going on in the world? Well, there's a lot of problems. There's always a lot of problems. Look, if you study history and you look at every year, there's always wars, there's always conflict, there's always it's always about wars, I'm so sick and tired of wars. But what does it mean about Israel? And what is Israel? That is the hugest question, okay? Coming from a point of view of a televangelist, of a big, Bible-thumping Christian who's trying to make money off of selling their books and getting people into their congregation. It's all about the money, folks. Attract the money. Coming from the point of view that these people have, that don't really seem to understand very much about the whole world, and really the message of Jesus Christ. I don't doubt that Jesus Christ would even know them. I think he would be a little bit embarrassed, you see. Coming from their point of view, though, they're trying to say that the end of time and that the conclusion of human history, till we get into a perfect state of affairs, to where the king is in charge, okay, the great one that they always talk about. Yeah, we follow him. But when's he going to come? How do we know when he's going to come? Maybe he already came here. Maybe you already ignored him or denied him so many times. How do you know? Why don't you look at your mistakes? And that's the whole thing. If we're going to talk about this whole ongoing prophecy, and this thing about the Jews, and this thing about how the Jews are supposed to factor in to the solution of the world history, these are a lot of tough questions that I'm going to put in front of you right now, because you've heard a lot about them. And if you don't feel like being neutral anymore, and you're trying to sort it out, and you're trying to see where you stand on all of it, now's the time. But I think that there's a room for discussion, and I don't think discussion can happen from me doing this monologue in a video. I don't think that. That's why I always say we have to get together, really, and have a roundtable discussion, heart to heart. I think that everybody that's concerned about it. I've been to Israel, I've been from here to Asia and across the Pacific, and I've been different places and observed different people, discussed with different people, and I find that life's purpose is to take a stance on this and to know what you're going to support, what do you believe in. So I think that the basic questions are in front of you. And if you've been watching this video, it interests you, and you're looking to get your your foundation, to make your commitment on certain things. So here's the deal. Here's the deal, because this is the question about the state of Israel. Is that really Israel? Is that Israel like what it talks about? I mean, does the prophecy, did the prophets talk about Israel having to become like some kind of state on paper amongst other nations? Does it say that anywhere? Because that's, I think that we have to ask the question, consider, what is Israel? What is the holy nation? What is the king going to be presiding over? I mean, do you just make assumptions, or do you really like face these questions? Because if you don't, I for one don't really think that you know anything about it. I don't think that you've really done what you need to do to figure it out. You're not learned, you're not wise unless you do answer these questions. You're not really clearly standing for anything. Maybe you just want to believe what these guys tell you. Yeah, there's 4 blood moons. Yeah, it's going to be the end. Yahoo! You got it made. Now that you accept that. It doesn't really make you anything. It doesn't guarantee anything. So here's more questions for you. Who are the Jews? Who are the Israelites? Who are the lost tribes beyond the tribe of Judah? Reuben, Dan, Manasseh. Was that one included? Or Benjamin? Was that one included, or was it added on later? Where are these tribes? Because how is Israel? Or did the definition of Israel change somehow? What is Israel? You have to be born into Israel? Who's born from Israel now? Oh, well, since 1948, going into 1949, you could be born from an Israeli of that nation state that was created and filed in the UN because they wanted to use the UN for that, see? But remember, FDR was the first primary proponent, political leader, ruler, president who promoted the United Nations. FDR. I wrote a book about FDR, which you should know if you've looked at all my videos, and not many people get. It's going to be on Amazon pretty soon, if nothing obstructs me. Yeah, it's possible that some people are trying to stop me from putting out that book. But the United Nations really came about as a overhaul, an improvement, an evolution of the League of Nations, which President Woodrow Wilson had promoted, and he was thwarted. Like, you know, he had huge obstacles put in front of him, and didn't do well toward the end of his term in his career. But if you remember, President Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, was one of the undersecretaries of Wilson. So that's where he took up the banner to have a world organization, and he renamed it the United Nations. Unfortunately, he wasn't there for the commemoration of it, but he sent his wife, because Eleanor Roosevelt became like a second, you know, the king and the queen kind of thing, toward where she promoted it, and she wrote the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. She was there, she promoted it, she helped it to happen, and that was also around the late 40s. And one of the first things that they did within the first year and before the second year was over of the United Nations presiding was to inaugurate Israel as a state, to vote it in as a member of the United Nations. Now, I want to be clear that Franklin Roosevelt, during his time, was not very supportive, did not go out of his way, and he had very specific reasons not to promote Israel. However, what happened after his death, his untimely and suspicious death in 1945, what happened was the baton was passed on to Eleanor Roosevelt, and she had different ideas. She took it in a different way and was more instrumental in promoting Israel when it came in front of her. She certainly was not shown or given, no proof has been given that she was against it. And I don't want to just say in these singular figures they have everything to do with it. I just want to say, like, there is a large body of representatives that have come together, the delegates, the diplomats that were in the United Nations, and they just went ahead and passed it. So Israel became created. And as I was saying, if you were a citizen there and you started moving in, they had a lot of migration into there. Whoever was born, they have a term for it in their modern Hebrew language. It's called sabra. If you were a sabra, and by the way, I have a lot of experience with it. I know a lot of sabras. I've dated several, and I married one. So I am entitled to speak about this from my experience, a sabra. So a sabra thinks and promotes the idea in their belief system that they are Israelis. They are of Israel, you see. And they think that you can be born into Israel. They think that. So if you look at all the information, you also have to talk to these other, what I call false prophets of the information, of the knowledge, of the religion. You need to analyze and confront them about their statements, about their false prophecy, what they claim to think what Israel is, what the United States, what the other nations have to do for Israel. These are huge questions, my friends, my viewers, my subscribers. So I can't go on forever, because that's not what video's about. Not yet, anyhow. I will do a forever video, but right now we're going to end about 36 minutes, going into 37 minutes. Thanks for watching. I send you a blessing. If you have taken in any of the truth here that I have conveyed and made available to you, find it from within. And come with me on this journey. I know that you want to know about these things, and you want to be on the right side of everything so you can partake of the reward. You can do the right thing just for its own sake. First of all, serve that purpose. Be a saint. Amen. God bless you, and I want to eventually meet up with you, and we do what we got to do. Okay? I don't do it because anyone else does. I do it because that's what I've been created for. That's why I choose to be obedient to that law and that purpose. It's a divine plan. So be it. Look forward to your comments and all that stuff, and make sure you're subscribed.